Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 12 in our incredible new tutorial series where you are going to learn artificial intelligence or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice strong glass of iced coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what we're going to do is we're going to start trying to understand colors a little bit better and understanding how to analyze a scene in terms of the colors that are within that scene. Now, up until this point in our lessons, we've gotten very familiar with OpenCV, and in particular, we've gotten very familiar with how to think of a picture or a frame from a video is just any other data set. It is a two-dimensional array. It has rows, it has columns, and at the intersection of rows and columns there is a pixel, and when you stack all those pixels together, you get a picture. And you've gotten familiar with how you can go out and grab a part of that picture and create a region of interest. You can go in and manipulate the data to do certain things to that frame. So you've sort of learn to find your way around an image or a picture as a data set. Now, the reason you would want to go in and grab a frame or grab a region of interest from a frame is maybe there's something interesting in that region of interest. Maybe it's something that you would like to track or that you would like to follow. And that, when you start thinking of it that way, you're really starting to kind of get into the early stages of artificial intelligence. And so what would be the easiest thing in an image to try to track on? Well, the easiest thing to kind of introduce this concept is to track on color. So let's say that you had a uniquely colored object in your frame and you zoom in on it, you create a region of interest around it, and then you track based on that color. So imagine I put a bright red dot on my finger and then move my finger around. You could track my finger based on the fact that I had a bright red dot on it. So the easiest way that we can begin to work our way into artificial intelligence is to try to track something based on color. And so to do that, I'm going to jump in and we're going to be working in the color space that we've gotten familiar with, which is the red, green, blue color space, or for the case of OpenCV, blue, green, red, but where you're mixing blue and green and red to get different colors. And then I'm going to kind of show you what the challenge is of working in that color space. And so let's go ahead and start by opening up our most excellent, and I should probably get out of your way here. Sorry, do a little Windows management here. I need to get out of your way. And then I need to move over where you can see my screen. And then what I will need you to do is open up the most excellent Visual Studio Code. And then we're going to start a new program. So we are going to come over here and we are going to create our new program, which I believe we are going to call this time OpenCV-15.py. And the .py is pretty important. And boom, a fresh new Python program just waiting to be written. And what I'm also going to do is, as always, we don't really want to start all the way from scratch and go in and just start, writing the code to grab and show the frame. So let's go ahead and start with our base program. You guys probably already have it if you've been watching this series of lessons. But for those of you who might just be joining us in the middle, I'll need you to go to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com. You can come over here to this happy little search icon and you can search on the lesson called Faster Launch of Webcam. You'll come to this lesson and then you've got some code down here. Click on the two little page icons, right mouse click and copy. and then come over here to your Python program, right mouse click and paste. And then we want to run this just to make sure that it still runs. And so I click here and it crashes. And when I look at this, it says that it's not grabbing the frame. Well, I believe for some reason on my setup, it's decided that the webcam is camera 0 instead of camera 1. And perhaps I've got several different USB devices and it's just loading them into a different direction. But we've talked about this before. Your webcam is probably either webcam 0 or webcam 1 here in line number 5 of the code. Let me get that out of your way. Let me get this a little bit bigger so you can see it. I think you can see that a little bit better. So I've changed that to camera 0, and let's see if it works now. Boom, there it is. We can copy and paste. Shazam. Okay, but let's go ahead and quit out of this. And now let's go in and let's start thinking about color. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to snag a color from our frame, and we're going to display that color, and then we're going to kind of look at what the data looks like for different colors, different real colors that come from our frame. So we're going to write a little piece of code that's going to go out, and based on a what? Based on a mouse click, where we click the mouse, it's going to go out and it's going to grab that color wherever we click the mouse. So if we are going to do that, what do we need to do? Well, we are going to need to listen for a mouse click. So we're going to have to set up a mouse click. So I'm going to say CV2. And I do this right before the while loop because that's just kind of a convenient place to do it. So I'm going to listen for a mouse click, CV2.set mouse callback, set mouse callback. And then which window do I want to listen on for a click on which window? Well, we have my web cam. And why that? Because that is the window that we're going to use down here in the program. And then I need to tell it, what do I do if there's a mouse click? Well, I go to the function mouse click like that. Okay, so if there's a click, it's going to run up to the function mouse click. Now there's a couple of problems here. One, I have not defined the function mouse click, which we'll do in just a second. And the second thing is, as I go through the program, when I get to this line of code, at this point there is not a window called my webcam, so I better create that before this line of code so that it doesn't crash. And so I'm just going to do a CV2.named window like this. And if you guys have been following these lessons, this should be very familiar to you. And I'm going to call it my space webcam. Okay, like that. Now, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but whatever you create here needs to be what you listen for a mouse click here on. And then it also needs to be what you're using down here. So everybody is kind of talking to or listening to the same window. So at this point, it's now the program is going to be listening or paying attention for a mouse click in this window called my webcam. Now the problem is that we say when you get a click, you run up to the function mouse click, and we have not defined that function yet. So we're going to come up here and we're going to define that. So I'm going to define the function, and it's going to be the function mouse click. And then when mouse click is called from the set mouse callback line of code below, it's going to pass parameters into it. So we've got to grab those parameters. The first thing, it's going to pass the event. What actually happened to the mouse? Was it the wheel, the button down, button up, whatever? It's going to pass it a code to tell it what actually happened with the mouse. And then it's going to pass a X position of the mouse, and it's going to pass a Y position of the mouse when that mouse event occurred. Now it's going to pass some other stuff that we're not going to use, but I'm just going to put in some dummy variables because you got to catch them whether you're going to use them again. So I'm going to pass, I'm going to have the parameter flag and then params, and we're not going to use flags or params, but I got to catch them because that callback is throwing them at me. And so now this is going to be my function. All right, what do I want to do when the mouse button is clicked. Well, I want to look and see if it is the left mouse button down, because when the left mouse button goes down, I want to grab that color. When the left mouse button goes down, I want to grab the color that is underneath the cursor wherever it is. Okay, so what will I need to do? Well, I need to say if the event that just happened, if it's equal to CV2 dot event underscore left button down. Okay, that is my action. That is what I am interested in. I am interested in left button down. Okay, now if left button down happens, I want to just print the event. I like to print it just to make sure that I kind of see that I entered this function, that I entered this if statement. So I want to print the event, and then I need to make that event available down in the rest of the program, and so I need to set a new variable EVT equal to event, and then if EVT is going to be available to the rest of the program, up here I need to make it a what? A global variable, because the things that are just sitting up here in this function, normally the variables that are up here in this function, the rest of the program doesn't know about it. So if I want everyone to know what the EVT is, I need to make EVT a global variable like that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So I make that a global variable. And then also, what else do I want? Well, down in the main program, if I click here, I click here, I click here, I need to know where the cursor was when I clicked, so that I can what? So that I can grab that color that is at that point. So I will also need to have a global, and I'll just call it, since I already used the variables xpos and ypos, I'll call these global ones x, the x val, and global y val. And that way the main program will know not just that a mouse event occurred, but what the x value and y value was of where the cursor was when that click happened. I hope this is making sense. You guys should understand this at this point, okay? So I also need to set those, and so if you actually click the left button down, then what I need to do is I need to say that the xval is equal to xpos, so it's sort of like the global variable is equal to the local variable, so then the world will know what it is, and then I'll say yval is equal to what? Y position, like that. So now when that left mouse button goes down, it's going to come into this mouse click function, and then it's going to come into this if statement, and then the whole world will know that the event happened. It will know what the x value was of the cursor and the y value was of the cursor when that event happened. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, then also, I also like to just kind of be able to kill things, and so I'm going to say if event is equal to CV2 dot event, and then I want the right button up, let's say right button up. So if I click on the right button and then let it up, then I can do other things like kill the window or do whatever, something like that. So I just want to keep track of that, and I do need a colon here. And then what I'll just say is EVT is equal to event, and then I might need to know what that is, so I'll just go ahead and print event just so I can look at it. Okay, so now this lets the world know, this lets the whole program know that a button was pressed and where the cursor was when that button was pressed. Okay, now a couple of things that I will need to do, a couple of little bookkeeping things. Remember that the main program, that when it's running, it's not, if I haven't clicked the button yet, there's no value for EVT or XPOS or YPOS. So I better give those some value just so the program doesn't crash in the loop when I'm doing something with those variables if the button has not been pressed yet. So I'll just come in here and I will say EVT equals 0. I'll say X val is equal to 0, and I'll say Y val is equal to 0, just to seed those things so the program won't crash if it runs into them down in the main loop. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little program that when you click on your main frame, it will tell you what the color was that you clicked on. So what I'm going to need to do now is I'm going to need to come down here inside of the while loop. I read the frame, and then I need to see, has the button been pressed? Has the mouse been clicked? So I'm going to say if, and then what? If EVT equal 1, that is 1 is the code for that left button down. Okay, so this is saying if the left mouse button has been pressed down, then what do I want to do? Well, I want to create a new array. And it's sort of like I'm going to make my own little region of interest, if you will. So I'm going to say that X is going to be equal to, I'm going to create a blank picture. I'm going to create a blank picture. How do I do that? I do that with the np.0 function. Remember the numpy zeros function? We did this a few lessons ago. Well, if I'm going to use numpy, I better import it up here. So I better come up here and say import numpy as np, because I need to create a blank little window. So now I can do that. So I can say that this new data array, this new picture, if you will, X that I'm going to call it, is equal to np.zeros. What does that mean? That means that I'm going to create an array. I'm just going to fill it with zeros, okay? But now I got to kind of tell it how big I want it to be, okay? Well, I want it to be 250 pixels rows. I want 250 rows. I want 250 columns, and then at the intersection of each row and each column I want 3 numbers, because I want it to be a color picture. So I need a blue, a green, and a red. So the third dimension is going to be 3. So I'll have a spot for blue and green and red. Now I got to tell NumPy, I've got to tell our friend np-zeros what type of number to put in there. So yeah, there's 250 rows, 250 columns, and at each position there's going to be 3 numbers. But what kind of numbers do I want? Well, I got to tell it the D type. And the D type that I want is I want an 8-bit unsigned int. And so this is going to be np for numpy dot uint for unsigned int, and then 8 bits. And so that just will give me, it's kind of like declaring a variable. I want all those zeros to be an unsigned integer that's 8 bits long. And so I think we did this before, and so this should not be a surprise to you. So X is equal to numpy zeros, and then it is going to be numpy unsigned int 8. And so now I've created an array, and let's just go ahead and just make sure that this works so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say cv2.imshow. I like to run my code a lot just so I don't put in 1,000 errors and it's harder to debug. So let's go ahead and show this, and then I'm going to just go ahead and I think I will call this window color picker, because I'm picking a color. And then what do I want to show? I want to show X. And then after I show it, what do I want to do? cv2.move window. And I don't want it like behind the frame. And so what do I want to move? I want to move my window color picker that I just made. Okay, and then where do I want to move it? Well, I want to move it over by the width of the main frame. And so I'm going to move it over by width. Move it over by width, and then I'm going to go down by 0. Okay, and this should give me a what? Okay, I put zeros in that whole array. This should just give me a black frame. Okay, let's see if it works, or if it's just going to crash on me. Okay, now I've got my frame. That's expected. Why is there no little black window? Well, there's no little black window because I haven't clicked. And so let me just click. Boom. Look at that. So I've got my little, I've got my mouse working anyway, and the mouse is then firing off that little completely black window. Okay, but do I want it to be completely black? I really don't want it to be completely black. I want it to be the color of wherever the cursor was when I clicked it. So I better run out and I better grab that color. Okay, and so what I could say is, I could say that I'll say CLR, like that color, is going to be equal to, it's going to be equal to the frame, okay, because I want to know where I clicked on the frame. So it's going to be, the color is going to be equal to frame, and then which, remember frame, it's when we're dealing with data sets on the frame, it is row, comma, column. So the first number is row. Okay, the first number is row. And what is the index then that I want? Row is what? It's Y value. Okay, it's Y val. Okay, row is Y val. And so I've got row Y val and then column what? That would be column X val. So I go to the row Y val and I go to the column X val, and that is where my cursor was. And now what do I want to do? Well, that data point that I grabbed, that's the what? That's the color. So then let's print CLR like that. And let's make sure that I'm thinking of this data right. So down here, now next time down here in the bottom, and I need to move this up a little bit to make sure that you can see that. That looks good. Okay. Now let's run this and see if we can get a color. Good news, it ran. Okay, now can you see I have my cursor over the green? So when I click on that green, then I should have the little window pop up that's black, and then it should print down below what the color is. Okay, there it goes. Now, one thing I don't like very much is it's printing it every time. And so before I do anything else, like let me quit. Why? Because when I clicked it the first time, it set the EVT to 0. It set the EVT to 1. And so even though I'm not still clicking, every time through this loop, EVT is still equal to 1. So after I grab the color, I want to go ahead and set EVT equal to 0 so it doesn't just keep printing that number. It doesn't keep going and grabbing it. It grabs it when I click it, and it grabs it once, then it doesn't do it again until I click again. Does that make sense? Okay, this time it should print one time. Okay, there it is. That looks good. So now I'm going to click. Okay, boom. I get my little window. Over there. Okay, and then I see what that color is. That color is 117, 29, and 50. Okay, 117, 29, and 50. Okay, now, why do we not like that so much? If you look back here, this is green. This is green. And these three numbers are blue, green, red. But you see what the eye sees as green. The computer says, well, yeah, that's green, but there's a whole lot of blue in there. Okay, so you see, this is kind of the problem that we have here. If I wanted to track on green, I think green is green. And when I look at this background, I think it's green. Okay, but treating it as data, the computer says, yeah, it's green, but it's got a lot of blue in it. Well, if I wanted to reach out and track on green, then what range would I say? Like, what ranges of green would be green, and what ranges of blue would also be green? And so this creates an almost impossible thing to track on. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Let's see if I can, I don't think this will actually work. But what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to say that X, okay, I want to now make my, X, array, I want to make it that color. So I'm going to say X is equal to, but which X? Well, X, the colon will give me all rows, and then the colon again will give me all columns, right? If I put something to the left of the first colon, that will be the start row. If I put something to the right of the first colon, that will give me the end row, the start row, end row. But if I just put the colon, it's all rows, comma, colon is all columns. And you guys should know that from our earlier lessons, okay? So I want to see if I can set that to, and just set that equal to CLR. Now, I don't know if this is going to work because it might want commas in there, but let's just see if this works. So X is equal to that. And so now I've given everything a color, but I just really think it might want. Okay, there's that. Now let's see what happens when I click. Okay, yeah, that didn't work. So let's see here. So I say X is equal to CLR. Okay. Why did that print it? Let's try that again. I thought that was giving us a value. Let me see if that works. Okay, I'm going to come over here and click. Okay, boom, it is working. It's just the thing is glitching because my studio is putting so much demands on my CPU that my webcam is kind of glitching here a little bit. Okay, but you see, look what happened. Right where I clicked, I got that color. Right where I clicked, I got that color. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to make that smaller. That's kind of a huge picture of me. So I'm going to come up here. Let's make this 640, and then let's make this by 360. Let's make it a little smaller so maybe it's a little easier to run. Okay, so now I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab this green, and then you can see that the green has a value of 125, but the blue has a value of 115. So when OpenCV looks, when you and I look at this, we see a green screen. When OpenCV looks at it, it sees something that's only a little bit more green than blue. It's almost as much blue as green. And so you see it looks at it quite a bit differently. All right, but that actually worked. Now, the one other thing that I would like to do is I would like to go ahead and I would like to label that little box with what the color is, and that way I don't have to look down below. Okay, so we're going to come in and we are, after we do the X, make it that color, then I am also going to say that I want to do a CV2.put text. I want to do a CV2.put text, and then what do I want to put on there? Well, I want to put on the image X, so I've got to put X, and that is getting annoying. Okay, I want to put X, and then what do I want to put on there? I think I'm going to have to make that smaller so that that's not quite as annoying. All right, so I'm going to put on the image X, what text am I going to put? I'm going to put the string value of the color. Okay, because you can't just put numbers, it's got to be a string. So I make CLR, that little tuple with the blue, green, red numbers, I'm going to make that a string. And then I am going to put it where I got to tell it, well, I'm going to go over an X value of 0, and I'm going to go down about 50, and that should put it up in the kind of like upper left corner if I'm thinking of this right. And then I've got to tell it the font, so I'm going to do a CV2.font, and then this Hershey complex will probably work. And then I am going to need it. What else do I need to do here? Okay, I need to tell it, I think it's like the font size. I'll give it a 1, and now it wants a color, so I'll give it the color 0, 0, 0. That is black. That's turned off blue, green, and red channels, so that should be black text. And then I think that the last thing is the thickness, and I will just give it a thickness of 1 as well. Okay, so now this, if I'm thinking right, should put the color on my little color box. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're going to come and we're going to click and we're going to get a green. And look at that. That is boom. And that is the color 118 for blue, 126 for green, and 52 for red. So even the green screen has red in it. If I click over here, look at that, 79, 87, 43. If I click down here, 71, 77, 39. If I click here, 121, 128, 51. Now to your eye, when you look behind me, what do you see? You see green. And it looks all kind of pretty much the same. But to the computer, there is a huge difference between this, okay, and this. You see, all these are all over the place. So if I was trying to track on this green, what ranges would I look for? Like what range of greens and what ranges of blues? And there would be certain blues that would go with certain greens, and so it becomes an untenable problem to try to track on that. Or like if you look at my shirt, that's blue of 255, 204 for green, and 236 for red. And so this has a bunch of different colors of all types in it. Okay, so do you see? The easiest thing to track on is color. All right, like if you think about your eye, you can very easily, you can say, this is green, this is purple, this is sort of flesh tone, all right? But to the computer, this is just almost like just crazy random numbers, okay? So the problem is that if we're going to try to track on color, tracking in the BGR or the RGB color space becomes untenably difficult. Now, I could build an algorithm where we could track on something like, let's say, this yellow lid. Okay, this yellow lid. We could write an algorithm that could track on that yellow lid, but it would be painfully difficult. It would be painfully difficult for us to identify all the different ranges that would distinguish this from this. Okay, it would become very, very difficult. So what do we need? We need a different system of numbers. We need a different way to think about colors. And that different way to think about colors is the HSV color space. HSV is hue, saturation, and value. Okay, so there's still three numbers. There's still the same amount of data to map the entire color space, but in the HSV color space, the computer looks at the color much more like you intuitively look at it. And what I have here is I have a color wheel, or a three-dimensional color wheel, that sort of explains the HSV color space. And let me get a little bit more out of your way. And the most important number is the hue. And the hue is kind of where are you in angle as you go around this color wheel. And so just look at the very top of the color wheel. And the hue is kind of like what the color is. And you can think of it as an angle between 0 and 360. And you can see that there is red and colors around red. There is yellow, colors around yellow, blue, colors around blue. And this missing slice out of this is kind of like the greens. All right, so that's the first number, is the hue. And the way to think of hue is like the color. It's like what you think of as color. Well, then what is saturation? Well, that's kind of like how intense the color is. And so if you come all the way out here, which would be kind of like full saturation, that's 255. And if you go all the way back to the center, that is a saturation of 0. The way you could think of this is, imagine that you had blue ink and you took a drop. If you had just pure blue ink, that would be full saturation of 255. If you took a drop of ink and dropped it in a glass of water, it's the exact same color, but now it's very, very dilute, so the saturation might be more like 2 or 3. Okay, and then if you took a drop out of that and then put it in another great big thing of water, the saturation would go almost pretty much all the way to 0. And so 0 saturation would be kind of clear. Now this is the cool thing. Look at this up here. No matter where you are on hue, no matter where you are on hue, no matter which color you are, if you set saturation to 0, you go all the way back to what? To clear. Okay, so as saturation gets less and less and less, all the colors sort of are moving towards clear, and you can see that in this little wheel up here. Okay, so the hue is really what color it is. The saturation is how intense it is, and as saturation starts going down below 255, you're kind of diluting it. You are diluting it with like clear. You could think of it that way. Well, then what is this value nonsense? Well, the value is think about adding black to it. So if I go all the way up to the top, I'm pure blue. But as I start coming down, if my value is 255 in value, then I'm kind of like pure blue. And as value begins to come down, 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 it's like I'm mixing black in. It's like I take a drop of this pure blue ink and I put it in black ink, okay? And you can see that as I come down, 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 by the time I get all the way to the bottom, I'm black. So no matter where I am in hue, if I put a value of 0, a value of 0 is going to turn any color, any hue is going to turn black if value goes to 0. If value is 255, then it's pure color. And so I mix the hue, which is the color, I mix it, the saturation kind of is pushing it towards clear, and the value is pushing it towards black, okay? So if you go to the center of this pie and go up and down in the center where saturation is 0, what are you going to have? You're going to have a grayscale because you've sucked all the color out of it. Think about this, because this color wheel really, it's very intuitive. And then all of a sudden the numbers that we get from that, become very, very, very intuitive. Now, I got to talk a little bit about what the values are. There's the generic hue, saturation, and value, which I've just shown you with this. But then how does that map specifically onto the OpenCV, kind of like 3 numbers, right? Like before I had blue, comma, green, comma, red. Okay, how does that map into hue, saturation, and value? So there's still 3 numbers. The first number is hue, the second number is saturation, and the third number is value. Okay, so still 3 numbers for every color. Well, let's talk about the easy ones first. On saturation, 0 is all the way to the center. It's going to be clear. And 255 is all the way out to the edge, which is full brightness, which is full saturation. Okay, so saturation is going to be a number between 0 and 255. Similarly for value, it's going to go from 0, which is going to be black down here, up to 255, which is going to be just straight the color with none of this darkness mixed in. Okay, so the second number, saturation, is going to go from 0 to 255. The third number, value, is going to go from 0 to 255. But hue is an angle. Okay, so you might think that hue would go between 0 and 360. That would have made a lot of sense, right? But the problem is we have an 8-bit number, and an 8-bit number can only go from 0 to 255. So what they did to keep it intuitive with angle, they just said, okay, let's make it half the angle. And so the hue goes from 0 to 180. So 0 starts here. I wish I could point up here. 0, look in the upper left up there at the little inset image. You see 0 is red. And then as I start going in a positive angle, when I get to 45, I've gone through yellow and I'm approaching green. As I go to 90 degrees, I go through green and I'm approaching blue. And then as I go to 135, I've gone through blue and I'm approaching purple. And then when I go from 135 to 179, I'm going back to red. Okay, and why did I say 179? Because I've got 180 and I start counting at 0, so I end at 179. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But you can see by looking at that really 0 or red would be maybe between 0 and 10. Red would be between 0 and 10 would be red. Red would be between 0 and 10, okay? But it would also be between about 169 and 179, okay? Because the red spans 0. So red goes from 0 to 10 from 0 to 10, and also from like 169 to 179, and that would get that whole range of red. If you said what's blue, that's easier. That looks like blue would go from about 110 to 135. But just understand that each click in this H value represents 2 degrees. And so 180 takes you all the way around the circle because each increment represents 2 degrees. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. But now it makes it very, very easy. It makes it very, very easy to understand color because it's more on an intuitive scale. I'm going to actually try to do this. I shouldn't try to do this on the fly, but let me take this X, okay, this X array here. I guess I better come back over here where you can see me coding, shouldn't I? Okay, let's take this X array and let's create a Y array, and let's say Y is CV2 dot CVT color. So I'm going to convert color, and I'm going to take the X array, and then I am going to do CV2 dot. I'm going to do a color conversion, and I'm going to go from BGR to HSV. And so now this Y array is the X array converted to hue, saturation, and value. And so now this, I think I'm going to have to say that I'm going to have to convert frame because that's where my colors are. So I'm going to take the frame that I grabbed, I'm going to convert it to the HSV color space, and I'm going to call that Y, okay? And now when I get my color, I'm going to get my color from not frame, but from Y. What am I doing? I'm trying to grab the HSV. I'm trying to grab the HSV parameters of where I am. And now I think at this point everything else should be the same. I think everything else should be the same. So let's do this. It's just the number that I print now is going to be in HSV format. If that doesn't make sense, stop and take a look at it again. Okay, so now when I click here, okay, it is giving me a hue value of 87. Okay, okay, it's giving me a hue value of like 85, 84, 85. What do you guys notice? You see, to your eye, the background looks the same color. Now to OpenCV, as I click around, what do you notice? The hue is always there at about 85, okay, 83. So now all of a sudden, to me, it looks the same. And to OpenCV in the HSV color space, it looks the same. Now the 126 and the 81, the value and the saturation, they're all over the place, but you see it doesn't matter because now I can just track on the hue. Okay, now let's come back over here and let's see if that makes sense. That is giving me about a 90, okay? And yeah, if you look over here, okay, if you look over here, about 83, okay, about 83 and you are looking in the upper left inset, okay, if I look in the 80s, that would be over here in this green, and this green as it is kind of tending towards blue. Okay, so you see all of a sudden it makes perfect sense. Or let's see if I come back over here. Okay, if I come back over here, that's where I want to be. And now let me click on my forehead, and that should be very much towards red. Okay, and if I come back over to the color wheel, you can see that 173 would be almost all the way around, and it's over there in that kind of pink going to red region. Does that make sense? Let's see now. Okay, let's look at this, right? This was the one we were going to want to track on. And then if we look at that, it's 24. Okay, where would 24 be? Oops, let's see. You weren't seeing the same thing I was seeing. I'm sorry. So let's come over here, and now I'm going to look at this. I'm going to click on that, and now the hue there is 23. And if I come back over here, where is, in the upper left inset, where is 23? Well, it's halfway to 45. What's right at halfway to 45? It is yellow. See, now if I wanted to track on yellow, I could say, well, give me the hues that are between 20 and 26, and that would be that little slice that is pretty much yellow. Okay, so in the HSV color space, it is very easy. In the HSV color space, it is very easy for you to track on color. In the RGB color space, it is almost impossible to track on color. Okay, I hope this makes sense to you guys. I really do. I hope this makes sense to you. And so I am going to give you a homework here. Okay, I am going to give you a homework. And what that homework is that homework is to go out, because I want you to see if you really understand how to deal with pictures as a data array. And I want to see if you really understand HSV. So what I want you to do is I want you to write a program. And what I want that program to do is generate a rainbow. I want you to generate an image. I want you to generate a window. Okay. I want you to generate a window that has the HSV rainbow. I want it to have the HSV rainbow. And as you go across your little window, as you go across your OpenCV window, I want the hue to change. I want the hue to change from 0 to 179. Remember, you stop at 179. I want the hue to go from 0 to 179. And then up and down, I want the saturation to go from 0 to 179. Okay, now on that one, you can go ahead and make the value, right? There's three numbers, hue, saturation, and value. You can only change two of them. So go ahead on that picture and make the value 255. So that just basically means that the value isn't going to have that black mixed in. Okay, so you're going to go from 0 to 180. And then as you go down, you're going to go from 0 to 255. And then on the second one, I want on the rows, I want you to go from 0 to 180. I mean, on the columns, I want you to go from 0 to 180, okay, in hue. And then in the rows, I want you to go on value from 0 to 255. Okay, now when the value is going from 0 to 255, just set the saturation, or just set the saturation to 255. Okay, I might have said it in a confusing way. I'm going to do it. I'm going to run the program for you. And when I run the program for you, I'll describe it again to make sure that the homework is in fact making sense. Okay, let me move over here and I'll show you what the output of the program is. Okay, so in the top window, as I go across the columns, the hue is changing from 0 to 180. In the top window, the saturation, as I'm going through the rows, the saturation goes from 0 to 255. Okay, and in all of those, the value is 255. Now, in this bottom window, as I go across the rows, the hue starts at 0, and the hue across the rows go to 179. And then on the rows, I go from, that was the column. So I start the column at a hue of 0. And I go to a hue, as I go across the columns, to 180 or 179. Now on the rows, I start with a value of 0. That's why it's all black across that top row. And I go to a value of 255. So the first one, the saturation, is changing from 0 to 255 as I go through the rows, as the value is pinned at 255. In the bottom one, the value goes from 0 to 255 as I go through the rows, as the saturation is pinned to 255. Does that make sense? You need to go in and generate these rainbows, these two rainbow boxes, with what you learned today. Now, this sounds easy, but this probably you're going to have to really think about. But I promise you, between today and the earlier lessons, I've given you everything that you need to know in order to be successful with this lesson. Okay, you have everything you need in order to do the homework. Now, if you are able to do this homework, I think it would be great if you did a screen capture of it, post it to YouTube, and then leave a comment down below with a link over to your homework solution. And then over there, when you do the YouTube, leave a link back to this lesson. So if someone comes on it, they have context to know what it is that you're trying to do. Okay. If you're able to do it, link over to your solution and then leave the comment, "I am legend." Okay. If you're not able to do it, leave the comment, "I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair." Guys, I feel like this lesson has maybe been a little bit more tedious than some of the earlier lessons. I apologize I didn't more succinctly explain the homework, but if you go back and listen to it as you're looking at the picture, I think you'll see what I am asking you to do. Okay, do it. Let me know if you're able to do it. I would say this is probably one of the more tedious lessons we're going to have in this series, but man, you've got to understand a couple of things. You got to understand that pictures are nothing but data sets, and you can find your way around those data sets, and you can create them, or you can take them from something else, and you can kind of go in and out and interact with these things as data sets. And that's sort of like what this is challenging you to do. Okay, guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these lessons as I'm having making them. I'm really having a lot of fun. I love looking at your homework. I love you guys that are posting your homework on YouTube and linking back to my video. I get a real kick out of seeing this, and I hope you guys will continue to do that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, be sure to subscribe. When you subscribe, ring that bell so you'll get notifications when my future lessons come out. And I will let you go now. Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.